Hey everyone, I'm Erin, the Impatient Gardener, and today I'm at Northwind Perennial Farm talking about annuals, how to integrate them into your garden, how to design with them, and some really great ones that you can grow in your garden, either from picking them up at a nursery or from growing them from seed. Down in the description, you will find links to my Instagram and my YouTube channel, but I hope you enjoy my talk. Hello everyone, I'm Erin. Thank you everyone for coming. The last time I spoke here, it was pouring rain, so this is a great improvement. They're going to bring some more chairs over, so if you're waiting for a chair, they are going to bring some more chairs over. I really appreciate everyone coming out. So a little introduction of me. I go by the name The Impatient Gardener. That started a long time ago. I started a blog, and then it turned into a YouTube channel and all the other things, and now I get to just talk about gardening with a lot of people, which is, you know, Sawyer's getting in trouble.
Get in there, Sawyer. Get in there.
That's funny. Way to go, Sawyer. If you're not wrangling a dog, what are you doing in a garden, right? So anyway, I live about an hour and 20 minutes north of here, on just north of Milwaukee, a few hundred feet from Lake Michigan. We're not right on the lake. So it's a little bit cooler there. Things warm up cooler over there, but summer is starting to arrive there. And I do a lot of gardening with annuals, which is what we're talking about here today. Now, I have a mixed border concept, right? Like I like trees and shrubs and bulbs and perennials and all the things. And I'm not really a believer in having like designated areas for different things. I do leave spaces in my garden specifically for annuals so that I can make sure to work those in. But I don't have like an annual garden. The closest I have to that is a very skinny bed along the south side of my house, which is, you know, alongside the house, and then it's next to a patio. It's probably 2.5 feet wide. And after many years of trying, I've learned it's almost impossible to get anything to grow there properly and overwinter nicely because it's abused by snow blowers and all kinds of things. So I do a lot of things with annuals. And today I'm going to be talking to you, well, first of all, the whole concept here is that I'm planting up these two beds over here, and you can walk around afterwards and kind of see I've started laying out the plants there, but I brought up all the plants, or most of the plants I'm going to be using to talk about them. Now, some of these are purchased plants that you can buy here or somewhere else. A lot of these are things I grew from seed, so I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because I think, you know, we think annual gardens and we think it might get a little expensive. Like you're gonna buy all these plants, they're gonna die in a year. And certainly they can if you're gonna buy everything. However, if you kind of mix things up and you do grow a few things from seed. Now some things, most of these things I did start over winter under grow lights in my house. So there's a little bit more time and effort and a little bit more equipment in it. You know, certainly if you're only going to do that for 1 year, you're not saving yourself any money. But if you're kind of in it for the long haul, you can get some really cool things. There are a couple things I'm going to show you that certainly you can direct sow, or you can just sow outside in a pot and then transplant it into the garden so it gets started. First, I want to talk just a little bit about sort of my design philosophy when it comes to annual gardens. If you think of, you know, I don't know what era this was, but back in the day, and you'll still see this on like business campuses sometimes, or universities, these bedding plant schemes in which they pick, you know, I don't know, let's say 5 annuals that all grow about a foot tall, and then they plant them all up in these great patterns. And that is not what I'm into at all. That's a very formal look, and I'm kind of an informal person in my garden and in my life, so I like things to be a little bit more free-flowing. So all of the design principles that I would apply to a perennial garden and what I'm looking for in plants carries over to what happens with annuals. It's no different. So if you've ever been to like one of Austin Eichheit's talks here, you know, and it's very much in the Roy style too, this idea of maybe you might call it a matrix planting, or it could be sort of a block of plants with a few little things sort of stuck in there. It's not just bold stripes of something. I like to mix things up a little bit. And so when you're talking about that, you're talking about height, texture, and color. And with annuals, of course, it's really all about color. We do this for color, but I think texture is greatly overlooked in annual plantings. So I often try to take a look at leaf textures, like on this Biden's here. I mean, this is just great leaf texture. Also a similar leaf texture, something you might find on like a Cosmos with that kind of feathery texture, which can really help that be a better choice than, say, this zinnia, if you want to plant that in like something with something like this. So this is this Salvia Evolution Violet. Is this violet blue? Or it might just be violet. They have a whole bunch of them up there. But this has kind of, you know, this is going to have a bolder leaf texture. And so this is almost the exact same shaped leaf as this zinnia. So I would put it with this Biden's because there's at least a leaf texture contrast there. And same thing with flower shape. Consider flower shape. Get tall spiky flowers and rounded flat flowers and little balls of color, things like that. So then also we forget about foliage. So there's a couple of things on here that are here specifically for foliage. And this is Mahogany Splendor Hibiscus. This is grown from seed. And actually, I've tried growing it from seed twice. Last year, I had a complete fail, and this year it took like that. I have no idea what the difference was. I think that's just sometimes how it goes when you're growing things from seed. So this plant will get bushy and big. And if you want to size control it, you just keep pinching away to a leaf node, keep it whatever size you want. In zones with longer growing periods, they'll get a flower on. I think it's red. Or reddish. I won't know, and neither will you, because we don't have a long enough growing season for this to develop a flower. So when you're planting this, you were thinking of this specifically for a foliage accent and a color accent, and honestly to fill in a nice big area, because we want some height difference between our plants when we're talking about annuals too. This is apparently, I've been told, very good as a cut flower too. So it goes really well, and you can imagine how good that would be in a bouquet. That's the other thing, is that when we grow some of these sort of taller annuals and we plant them, you know, pretty densely, you've got plants you can use for cutting as well. You don't necessarily have to have a specific cutting garden, although I know it's easier sometimes to have a specific cutting garden because you're like, well, now I'm allowed to do that. I would encourage you to allow yourself to cut some of your flowers. They're going to keep blooming. All these annuals are going to keep doing their thing. And it is really nice to bring things in. This is just another one I brought over. This is one of the papyrus grasses. Proven Winners has 3 or 4 different varieties of this. Now this is Baby Tut. This is the shortest one. This one almost reads like a grass when you plant it. 18 to 24 inches tall is what it says on the label. I would say usually for me it's shorter than that. Thrives, it's a papyrus, so it really loves water, but it's fine in the ground and doesn't need like a ton of supplemental water. I would say if you want it to grow more, give it lots of water. So this is just another example of a really good texture to work into a garden where you are not thinking about flowers at all. So that's, you know, kind of one of the things I want to encourage you to do is don't just think about annual plantings just for the flowers, even though that is literally where our brain goes first with that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, so that's kind of the design philosophy that I'm going to be working in. So when you walk through here, you'll see these little clumps of flowers. I do think in an annual bed like this, I do think you can get aggressive with color. I have no problem, you know, throwing in oranges. Listen, I'm an orange and pink person. Some people think orange and pink don't work. I will put orange and pink certainly in the same garden, sometimes next to each other if they're the right ones. And like, it's one of those things where you know it. Like you'll know when you see an orange and pink together, whether that, in your gut, whether that one works or not. So there's a fair amount of color happening here, and I am trying to kind of push the color a little bit with that. There's a couple of colors specifically I want to call it, and we don't have any example of chartreuse here. I tried to grow some of my favorite annual for this presentation, and it didn't work this year, which is the first time I've ever had a fail on, but it's Nicotiana alata. If you ever watched any of my videos, even the last time I talked here, I just rave about that plant. But it's this beautiful chartreuse flower, and that one's pretty big. That one gets 30 inches tall, or even a little bit more. but the chartreuse is so good. And that chartreuse color, I find, is a great uniter in a garden. If you can find, there's also like that lime green zinnia, green envy. There's a couple of sort of lime green zinnias out there. If you can find that chartreuse color, that will unite a garden. I swear, if you move that around the garden, that will bring a whole garden together more than I think any other color, because it keeps your eye moving, but it doesn't stop you. As opposed to white. With white, and this is a fabulous, I think this is Starlight White Zinnia. They have some over there. This is a great zinnia. I love these little low growing zinnias. I mean, I like all the zinnias, but this is kind of nice. And those just keep flowering like crazy. But I use white very, very intentionally in annual plantings, because white will stop your eye more than, unless you have a whole garden that's sort of a white themed garden, white will stop your eye faster than any other color will. So use white in a place where you want someone to focus on. So for instance, you'll see there's a bird bath over here when you come around. And in front of that, I did a combination of Salvia argentea and this white zinnia, because that's a focal point. We want your eye to go there. We want you to stop. We want to make that bird bath special. And so we're going to bring in those in that area, even though I'm not going to use probably any other white except for maybe the white cleome in this garden, because it's really it should be used, I think, sparingly and very consciously where you put it. If you want to create a pattern with some repetition, which is a good idea, again, same design principles you use anywhere else in your garden. The rules don't change because they're annuals. Then, a very staccato rhythm of a white plants kind of spaced out, that can definitely create really good rhythm. So just know that white's a little bossy in the garden. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the plants that we have up here and how we're using them, but I'm going to start, I think, with most of the ones that I grew from seed, because I think it's important to just talk about some ways to stretch your dollar. And honestly, some of these plants you're not going to find somewhere else. Like if you want these, you're going to have to grow them yourself, which is, I think garden centers are catching on a little bit more, but it's moving slowly. So this is one of my tried and true plants. It's in I don't know what this, I reuse all my pots, so don't pay attention to where that pot is. I grew this from seed. This is Salvia argentea, also called silver sage. And this is such a good front on the border plant. So it will create a sort of a rosette of these beautiful fuzzy leaves. They're so good if you have kids who are in the garden or whatever, they will definitely pet those. I encourage plant petting. They will create a beautiful little mound. And this is a biennial, or I was talking to somebody who said they've had good luck perennializing this. So this will just get just these leaves the first year. And honestly, that's what it's here for me, is just the leaves. The second year, if allowed to flower, and I was just saying, I find it difficult when this thing is hell-bent on flowering. I find it difficult to stop it from flowering. But it will put up big spikes of white salvia flowers, and the flowers are gorgeous. I mean, the spikes are probably that tall. It gets just covered in them. And they're these beautiful, almost sort of snapdragon-y kind of salvia blooms, kind of like a beak type shape. Of course, the hummingbirds love it. The one thing I would say about those is that it gets very floppy. Those stalks are heavy. It gets very floppy. It's a little hard to control. And the problem is usually that I'm planting this always at the front of the border. So when you get those big, it's not always a great thing. I usually let one go and try to keep, because the flowers are beautiful. I usually try to let one go and then keep the other ones pruned. But I'm telling you, last year there was a couple that I tried to keep from flowering, and they just wouldn't stop. Every time I turned around, there was another flower spike coming out. And finally I thought, I'm going to stop like battling Mother Nature on this. It's a very loud, slow-moving plane. So this is, anytime you see these sort of gray leaves with the fuzzy foliage on it, this is super drought resistant. That's usually what that means. But it does tolerate water. So you can put it in with other stuff and it'll tolerate it. Sometimes the lower leaves on the bottom will start to yellow a little bit. I just pick them off so they keep that nice structure. But it's a beautiful mound. So this is an easy to grow from seed. Now, if you keep cutting those flowers off, you may be able to keep it coming back. And I will say sometimes after it does flower, the plant is kind of shot. Like the foliage gets kind of tattered. Sometimes they're okay. Sometimes I just cut them off and replace it with a new one for that year because it's tough growing. But great one to grow from seed. I've never seen this in a garden center. Seed sources, Select Seeds. I order a lot of seeds from them because they have a good variety of unusual annuals. Swallowtail Gardens has pretty good annual selection. And then there's the other bigger seed houses that you can find some things at. And actually this is not difficult to find. So that is one of my favorites. This adorable little guy here is quickly becoming a new favorite of mine. This is Amelia coccinea, that's the botanical name for it, and it is tassel flower is the common name for it. I just grow a lot of annuals in like these I reuse these plug trays. And this is what it does. It just gets these wiry stems, but it gets the clearest orange flowers I maybe have ever seen. And I actually usually use this in the perennial garden and just dot it throughout the perennials because it will weave up through them. So last year I grew this next to purple lovegrass and it was an amazing combination. This year in another garden I did for somebody, I put it next to a dark perennial geranium, Boom Chocolata. It has this really dark foliage and purple flowers, and it's growing up through that. It is said to reseed. I grew it for the first time in my garden last year, and I can't say I've seen any seedlings yet, but I'm hoping, it will. By the way, some of these plants that we're going to talk about, they're reseeders. The key to reseeders is not having mulch. If you have really well mulched beds, you're not going to get reseeders because the seeds just aren't going to make their way down in there. Or, one of the things you can do if you do want to mulch heavily is around this plant, just pull the mulch away so that when the seeds drop, they have a place to go. So this is a great one. And, the leaves are nothing great to look at, but they're all down here. There's all this kind of basically basal foliage. And then you get these. And this is like just the perfect little plant to tuck in. And you won't see it from, this is not what they call a 50-mile-an-hour plant or anything. You're not going to see it until you really get into the garden. And then you notice it, and it's this charming little accent. And I really like these plants that invite you to take a closer look at a garden. This guy is going to go, okay, this is kind of anemic. This is my way of telling you, you don't have to grow amazing plants inside to have them turn into amazing plants in your garden. So don't feel like when you're growing a plant, it has to look like this. Because most people don't have greenhouses and frankly time to fertilize things all the time. But once you get these things into your garden, they will go nuts. This is one of my favorite vines. This is purple hyacinth bean. The botanical name is Lab purpureus, which is fabulous. So I'm going to plant this actually along the fence over there. So go stick it in the corner and we're going to train that to just go along the fence. This guy will get big. It gets beautiful. These leaves get almost, this is more an accurate depiction of the leaf color. They can actually turn almost purple. It gets huge flower, like racemes of flowers that are kind of purple and white. And eventually you will get the bean pods on it. They're shiny purple bean pods, not edible. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. They might be edible, but it's one of those things where it wouldn't be tasty edible. They're not poisonous, though. So you could put those look beautiful just when those seed pods are on there and when you get the combination of flowering and seed pods at the same time. So that's another one. It's a bean, so it's super easy to grow from seed. In fact, you might be able to just stick these in the ground and have them go. I usually, just because my garden is so crowded, it's easier for me to start things in pots sometimes. But that is an excellent annual vine, and I think annual vines are completely underappreciated. And I think we should all be growing more of them because you can tuck them in anywhere. I love annual vines, and I play around with them every year. I'm trying to sort of grow them all and see what my experiences are. This is one I come back to all the time. This year I'm doing Spanish flag, which is new to me, and also the cypress vines. We'll see how those go for me, but every year I grow something new. Oh, and purple bellvine is another. I should have brought a purple bellvine down. Is another favorite of mine. A little tough to get started from seed, but once you get it going, you got to make sure it has lots of heat. A lot of these vines are from Mexico, and so they want a lot of consistent heat. So I will actually leave those on heat mats the entire time they're growing, just because I grow in my basement, it's not warm enough. Then, I'll just see if there's anything else other than this. I just wanted to call out the humble nasturtium. So, I mean, everybody knows nasturtiums, and the best thing about nasturtiums is that, you know, you can literally just stick the seeds in the ground. You do not need to start these ahead of time. I do it because, again, my garden is very full. And there are so many good varieties out there now. Do pay attention to whether they're a trailer or a clumper, because the trailing ones, they'll run across your yard. I mean, it's great, it's beautiful, but they get big. I mostly grow the ones that tend to stay clumped. There's a whole series called baby red, baby orange, etc., that are really nice, very compact little plants. These are sun to shade. So if you have any spot in your garden where you just need a little something to cover the ground, a few nasturtium seeds will take care of that. The whole plant is edible, by the way. It flowers, leaves, the whole enchilada. The one thing to know about nasturtiums is that they are not interested in fertilizer. They want abuse. So if you put these in an area that's heavily fertilized, they will probably grow a lot of leaves, which is not the worst thing. The leaves are beautiful, but they probably won't produce a ton of flowers. So abuse them, feel free to abuse them, or put them in a spot where they're not going to get a lot of fertilizer and a lot of water. They will be just happy. I mean, not that they want to be dry, but they do not want to be coddled. So nasturtiums are just one of those plants. Again, I wouldn't be without those. And, you know, they're great in the vegetable garden. There's all sorts of, you know, there's some great plant partnerships that you can do in the vegetable garden with them. I just grow a tray of them and stick them everywhere. So that kind of covers the stuff I think that I brought to grow from seed. Oh, no, one more. This guy's looking sad because I literally dug him out of my garden last night. But he will perk up. This is a fabulous plant. It's called Verbena Bampton. It is a type of verbena. And we're going to talk about other verbenas that you're probably more familiar with. This will get, let's say, usually 18 inches tall. Sometimes they get a little bigger. When they flower on the most delicate little wiry stems, kind of a pinky purple flower, and it just kind of moves its way up the stem. But it's one of these ethereal plants that offers that airy texture in a garden, and especially when we're talking about, you know, big, bold leafed things. A plant like this just creates kind of a mist of purple. So I have tried growing this from seed multiple times. It's tough to get started. So, at least inside. It is an amazing reseeder though. So if you can ever get your hands on a plant, and then you make sure that you don't have a super mulched garden, you will have this plant for as long as you want it. You can dig it up, move it around, put it wherever you want it. It reseeds really, really well. And it is for sale commercially. I know Brent at Intrinsic sells it. So I think there's a good chance of finding this out there in a nursery. But if you buy one plant, then you're good forever. It'll reseed for you. And it's not an aggressive reseeder. It's nothing that's gonna take over the garden. It's just very, very nicely well behaved and a fabulous, fabulous plant. So that's it for the stuff that I grew. But let's just talk about the other verbena because it's here. So you guys most of you know this plant. This is Verbena bonariensis. And this is a fabulous plant. Now this will reseed semi-aggressively in people's yards. I think Brad at the back has had a battle with it this year. So not all of them. And I think that tends to happen in like a little bit warmer zones. So if you guys are pushing into the warmer part of Illinois or something, you might see this reseeding aggressively for you, or more than you might want. Very easy to just take the hoe and get it. You know, the nice thing with reseeders is that after a while you recognize what those seedlings look like. And so you know earlier in the process, okay, I know what Verbena bonariensis looks like. I do not need it there, and you just pull it out there. So, and it is, you know, important with reseeders to thin them. a little bit. You know, if you get a clump of Verbena bonariensis like this, none of those plants are going to look that great. So you want to thin them out anyway. And it's very easy to do early in the year. Now, this is a plant that will get quite tall. And I will tell you to put this at the front of the border, because this is one of these plants that you look through. And I think it's best used at the front mixed in with other things, because it just adds a dimension. You know, we always think about tall in the back and short in the front. And of course, there's good reasons for that. But by throwing in a couple of things that are a little taller in the front that you look through, that don't block your view, it creates a whole nother dimension to the garden that that is very enticing and creates a little bit more of, well, I think it creates a little bit more of that cottage feel without going overly cottage. And I say that not disparagingly to very traditionally cottage style gardens, but I think that there can be a more modern take on them, and that's where plants like this, I think, come in. Now, a couple other plants, I'm just going to talk about this one quickly. I'm not using this plant because they have exactly one here, but I want to tell you about this plant, and I'm not going to use it here. Somebody can come up here afterwards and grab it if you want to buy it, but as far as I know, there's only one of these here. This is Plectranthus mono lavender. I love all Plectranthuses. They are really good foliage plants. There's one called Silver Shield that looks a lot like Salvia argentea but taller and not quite as fuzzy leaves. But Plectranthuses are great plants. Coleus are Plectranthus, so you know that family. But this is how it flowers, and it just keeps going and going and going. And it's gorgeous in the garden. It has that great deep leaf color. So I'm only mentioning this one because it's such a good plant. If there was more of them, I would put them in this garden for sure. But there isn't, and I'm not going to be the person who steals the only one. 12 to 18 inches tall on that is what the tag says. So anyway, that's a great plant. Keep your eye out. If you ever see that, it's probably worth grabbing.
Full sun?
Full sun. Although you can push those Plectranthus certainly into part sun. Okay, now a couple other plants I want to talk about. We've already talked about that. Okay, we know we love zinnias. We've got two types here. The short one, this is the Dreamland series. This is like maybe like a 20-inch tall series. It's kind of nice because it doesn't, sometimes those zinnias, like a state fair zinnia, that's like this. Great, love them, just for a different application than what you would use this. So for this one, I'm going to use this right in this corner here. That'll be nice height in this corner. And then I'm going to plant it with this beautiful salvia. I love these salvias. It's Amelia Cup salvia. Again, that's Evolution Violet. I love these mixed in because it's such a good contrast in color and texture, and purple and that corally orange. You can't go wrong with that. Other salvias that are really good are actually a lot of these new salvias that they're selling are very good. This is one from Ball, and this is Plum Crazy. Proven Winners has some similar ones, like the Rockin' Fuchsia would be the similar one to this. These get big. They get big, they get bold, they fill up a lot of area. I actually don't plant, I don't know about this one, but this is 36 to 48 inches tall and 36 inches wide. I do not put these in containers anymore because they will overwhelm a container. I don't think they're the best unless you have an enormous container. But the nice thing about these is that both the calyxes and the flower are beautiful. So even this is still beautiful. There's only 4 flowers on this, and the rest is all calyxes, and it's still really pretty. So you don't have to worry about like constantly being there to deadhead, because that's not my style of annuals either. I don't mind deadheading dahlias. I kind of enjoy that process, but I don't want everything in my garden to need deadheading. So look for things like this that have, beautiful calyxes on them as well. This is another one. This is the Skyscraper series, and this is dark purple. Very similar plant, a little brighter pink. And then in here, let me just grab one of these. And then this is Skyscraper Orange. So that's from that same series. And that's a beaut. That's just going to have those gorgeous flowers on there. So those are big ones. So think about that. You know, and big plants that you might want to think about planting something lower around the base of them mixed in with them, because there's not a lot of interest at the bottom of these plants. So maybe that's where you want to stick in something like this Bidens. I love Bidens, by the way. It does so well in the ground, in containers. It's underused, but it fills into such a nice little dome. Herbs. Some herbs make amazing annual plants in an annual planting. This is one of them. This is African blue basil, and it gets very blue. I mean, this foliage as it matures does get a little bit blue. It gets really pretty pink flowers on it, and it will flower a little earlier. It's not what you want out of a basil if you're growing it to eat it. It is what you want out of a basil if you're growing it for ornamental. Perfectly edible, by the way. I think it's more of a Thai basil flavor, I think. Honestly, whenever I've grown this, I've never eaten it. I just grow other basils to eat, and then I grow other basils as ornamentals. This is gorgeous in a garden. Great texture because of that foliage, great flowering. So don't overlook that. The other thing I'm doing this year is I'm actually mixing in a lot of curly parsley, which I hate eating curly parsley. I like to eat flat Italian parsley. But curly parsley actually makes a really good little textural thing in an annual planting. So I'm actually mixing some of those in, actually making a few little hedges. There are short little basils as well. There's one called boxwood basil, there's bonsai basil, there's Aristotle basil. These all make these tiny little balls. Great for mixing in. If you want to create a little hedge with them, I think that's primo too. So don't overlook herbs, because I think herbs can be a really cool combination. And I think, you need foliage. You need foliage heavy plants in an annual planting, because otherwise it's just too much on your eye. Let's talk a little bit about shade. Now some of these things, hang on. Let's talk about Cleome. Cleome's such a good doer, right? So this one is, what's this one called? Lavender Dreams. This is a sun plant. Cleomes this is such a traditional cottage classic, right? These stay a little shorter. This is 20 to 32 inches tall. Some Cleomes get enormous. And I don't know if this one is a reseeder. Some are pretty heavy reseeders. But this is such beautiful, flower accent on this. They just keep blooming and blooming and blooming. So that is, and there is one, they have one planted in the container back here. So when you check out the garden, you can see how that works in a container. I think they're really nice for along pathways. They kind of have a nice feel about them. A couple of shade plants to talk about. You can put begonias in the ground. It's no problem. They'll be just fine. Dragon wing begonias are classics, right? We love these, I think. I think most people do, is what I'm saying. I know I love them, and I think most people like them. But there are other ones out there. There's one called Canary Wings, which is chartreuse, so that would bring in that chartreuse accent. It has kind of a more reddish flower on it. That one's beautiful too, but great for shade. So don't think there's no annual gardening in shade. And then this one, and I actually picked these two because I think they kind of go together. I think this pink is fuchsia enough to work with the pink of this. This is Glimmer Impatience. I think this is a pretty new series. It's a double Impatience that looks, they look like roses. So, that's at least what I see, except when you break off the flower. Oops. But beautiful, beautiful flowers on it. These have been rained on quite a bit. But another really good one for the shade, so that you can fill up your shady areas as well. Little fronting of nasturtium with those to get a little ground cover action. I like annual gardens to be full. I don't really want to, at least in a month or so from now, I would like them to be full. I don't want to see a lot of ground, so I do look for ground covers when I can, or plants that will spread out. So I will stick in, like there's wire vine over there. Wire vine is such a cool plant. And that will look that is a really cool little ground cover to tie things together. Alyssum, the old fashioned, I grow some of the newer varieties that tend to flower a little bit longer, but the old sweet alyssum, there's nothing wrong with it if you are a traditionalist. That spreads really nicely. Stops blooming, cut it back, give it some fertilizer, you're good to go. Also, I have up here some angelonias. Where are those? Where are those in? Here they are. Angelonia is such a good plant too. Containers or in the ground. They have a pink one and then there's a blue one as well. I think I had one of those up here somewhere. This is, I don't know if I have a tag on this. This is the one they have up front, and I can't remember which series this is. But these, again, we've got spiky texture, spiky flowers going up. So work that in, because that just, it's good to have that mix of all those different flower shapes. And Angelonia keep going. They're called summer snapdragon. They actually do best when we get into the heat of summer. They love the heat of summer, so they will keep trucking along during that. Was there one other one that I want to talk about? Oh, no, but I did want to talk about this. This is fertilizer. So, annuals, we are asking a lot of annuals. They, if we want annuals to keep flowering away like crazy, they need more food than other plants do. And I'm not a big fertilizer person. I do not fertilize my perennials as a matter of course. I only fertilize a handful of shrubs or vines, but I do put down an organic fertilizer before I plant an annual garden. So this is, I don't even know, I think this is the down to earth one. It doesn't matter. Get one that's an organic fertilizer that's meant for flowering and use it according to the directions and put it down before you plant. I don't put things in holes. I just broadcast spread it, and what goes in, goes in. Avoid the areas where you're growing your nasturtiums, and that will help a lot because these are pretty hungry plants. I don't do a lot of deadheading on plants like this, with the exception of just if I'm walking past it and I see something, I'll just nip it off with my finger. But other than my dahlias, I don't really make it a point to go around my garden regularly and deadhead. And speaking of dahlias, that is one plant I didn't talk to you about, because there's a lot of dahlias going in this garden. I love dahlias. And you're thinking those are kind of expensive. This was free. In fact, all of the dahlias that I'm putting in this garden were free because I grew these all from cuttings. So the variety here is HS Date. It's a low growing variety with dark foliage. It will get darker as it's in more sun. And it's a single flowering orange flower. It's beautiful. Those single varieties will flower continuously. They just never stop flowering. They start early, they keep going. The nice thing about HS Date is it tops out at 24 inches tall. And so I never stake it. So I didn't want to put anything in this garden that was going to require them to be in here all the time, staking stuff up. So these should all manage themselves just fine. It's very similar to the Mystic series. Mystic is not quite as short, but kind of similar to that. And so I grew these from cuttings. I think I did this in February. And I do have a video about it, and there's lots of other sources for how to do it. But basically, you pre-sprout your dahlia tubers very shallow. You just take cuttings off them when they get about that big. Stick the cutting in just a little bit of rooting hormone. It's probably not even necessary, but I do it anyway. Stick them in a little cell, and then they just go. Keep them on heat, and they go. So this was started in February, and this will probably has tubers already. It will develop tubers. You can save them, the whole thing. So if you're into dahlias, you don't have to go buy new ones every year, or you don't have to look for a bunch. If you want a whole bunch of one variety, cuttings is a very good way to grow them. It's also easy to grow dahlias from seed. You just won't know exactly what you're going to get when you grow them from seed. I would invite you guys to check out the garden. I still have to lay out a couple of corners here and there, but kind of see how things are laid out a little bit. Some of the little areas on the front are where I'm going to be putting like nasturtiums and things like that. But if you have questions about it, this Mahogany Splendor, by the way, like you'll see this kind of tucked towards the back, and that's because this is going to be like a shrub. It's going to be huge by the end of summer. So this isn't something, and it gets bulky. So it's not something I would put at the front of the border like this beautiful verbena. So have a look around the garden. Let me know if you have questions. Thank you for coming.